my dudes, how you doing? I hope you're having a damn good day, and today we will be talking about Jose Mourinho's AS Roma set of tactics. Of course, I've got 4 different sets of instructions, formations and tactics to go through, so this video will be slightly longer and it has taken a while to make, so I would appreciate it if you could smash that like button. If you are new, subscribe, that would be damn great. We are on the road to, what is it, like 1,400 subscribers. We're like 10 away at this point. If you can subscribe, it would be absolutely great. But let's hop into the tactics. We have got no time to waste. We have got, of course, Tammy Abraham starting up front. In behind him, we've got Pellegrini as the captain. We've got Dybala. We've got Matic, Cristante, Spinazzola, who's a fantastic left back with a right foot. We've got Skolski, we've got Mancini, we've got Smaldini, we've got Ibanez, we've got Patricio. On the bench, we've got Belotti, Awar, new signing, of course. We've got Bove, Indika, another new signing. We've got Svilar, we've got Shelik, we've got Llorente, and then in the reserves we have a few other players like El Shaarawy, Christensen, of course, Karsdorp, who I like, but apparently Jose and him have beef, so I don't know what's going to happen with him. We've got Kamara and then a few other players I just don't care to talk about. But yes, this is the formation going forward. It is, looking at the formations, a 5-2-2-1 or a 5-4. However you want to put it, that's how it goes. We've got 3 centre backs, 2 DMs, 2 wing backs, 2 cams, and then of course 1 striker. So just having a look at the defensive tactics, of course, for Jose Mourinho in this formation and set of tactics, it is set to pressure on heavy touch. So you will look to try and press and make the opposition make that mistake, but of course it won't be in their own half like the instructions are telling you over here. More or less, Jose Mourinho likes to implement this when the opposition cross the halfway line, so you will have more of a defensive solidarity to your team going forward. Of course, you can see the depth is set to 40, so you won't overcommit too many players, but what that does is, when the opposition do have the ball at their feet and their forwards have the ball, it will create overloads for those players, in terms of your defensive players, in terms of Mancini, Smalling, Ibanez, of course your 2 wing backs, and of course Cristante and Matic in the midfield. So they will look to overload the opposition and make them make mistakes, causing turnovers and then allowing you to spring counter-attacks going forward, because that is a very Jose Mourinho-esque thing to do. He is a very pragmatic manager and it works out very well, especially in Italy with the style of play, of course. As for the width, it's set to 20, so of course your wing backs are very widely spread. Of course your midfield is also not the furthest apart, but it is also quite widespread when you have the ball, so you will look to try and be a bit more compact. Your wing backs will look to more or less become fullbacks in a way, defensively of course, so you will have that going forward. And then of course we did speak about it, but the low high block, the mid low block, however you want to see it, where you do have 3 centre backs that will be hanging back along with your 2 DMs, of course, in the midfield. As for the offensive play, it is set to a slow build-up, so Jose, he does like to implement playing out from the back, more or less trying to draw the opposition on, and then he'll look for one of his players to advance the ball with a long ball over the top, or look to quickly play it through the lines. But at the same time, it's not a law that has to be done with a Jose Mourinho team. He is quite happy for his goalkeeper to go very long. I mean, we saw it at Manchester United, we saw it at Spurs, and now we're seeing it with Rui Patricio at Roma, where he is quite happy for him to boot the ball long, look for Tammy Abraham, look for Belotti, of course, let them chest it down, pass it off, and so on, and move up the field swiftly like that. So it is a slow build-up play, but at the same time, you will be looking for a counter-attacking-esque style of football where you will look to draw the opposition on and then boot it up the field as fast as possible, with counter-attacking mentality and press and everything, with your forwards making forward runs, so the likes of Tammy Abraham, Dybala. Of course, you've got your Capitano, you've got, I forgot his name, that's why I'm doing this, but you've got Pellegrini, of course, all bombing on forward, of course, and then you have your wing-backs who will be bombing on forward as well. So you will look to try and spring counter-attacking play. And then of course the width is set to 80, which is quite wide, but of course you want your wing backs to succeed in this area, fire crosses into the box, but also at the same time the width being at 80 allows the offense in the middle of the park, of course the midfield, to somewhat stretch and try and stretch the opposition, of course. As for players in the box, it is set to 6. Of course, you don't want to overcommit too many players. Like I said, Jose is a very pragmatic man himself, and he will look to more or less be more defensively solid than offensively attacking. So 6 is quite nice. It does allow the opposite fullback to get forward as well. But mainly it will be the likes of Dybala, Pellegrini, as well as Tammy Abraham or Belotti getting into the box and being able to attack. And then it does allow the likes of Cristante or whoever you have as a left-sided DM to somewhat get a bit more forward and just hang around the edge of the box as well. As for corners and free kicks, as per always, it is set to 4. Jose, he's a set piece specialist, and he loves his corner goals as well as free kick set pieces, of course. So as for the goalkeeper in this situation, Rui Patricio, he is set to come for crosses and have a balanced approach to saving outside the box. Of course, Jose, he's never had a sweeper keeper mentality where his keeper has to be able to play with his feet and everything. But at the same time, you are playing a somewhat low block, so you don't need your keeper to be able to run off his line, make sure he collects the ball, passes it off, and so on. So, of course, it makes the most sense. As for Ibanez and Smalling, they are set to their base set of instructions. But as for Mancini, I always do prefer this thing where you do more or less change one of the centre-back instructions, of course, and Mancini is set to aggressive interceptions and step up. Of course, this is looking to more or less recreate and replicate his personality in the game, very much like what we did with Martinez, where he is an aggressive player and he does look to step out and try and follow his man into the midfield. And that's what Mancini also tends to do. He is also very aggressive, which is why we've gone with the aggressive interceptions. As for your midfield pairing of Cristante and Matches, they are set to more or less the same set of instructions. Cristante is slightly different, but both are set to tight marking, as you can see there. Both are set to stay back while attacking, and then both of them are set to cover the centre. With Cristante sometimes looking, even though it says stay back while attacking, you will also have him more or less drifting slightly forward, with Matic more or less holding the shield, with shielding the back line. Of course, so it does make a lot of sense that when your fullbacks tend to bomb on, these guys will be there to help protect the back four. And like I said earlier, Jose is a very pragmatic man. He would rather, try and make sure that there's numbers back in order to prevent counterattacks than bomb on forward and try and score as many goals as possible. But this is a new Jose. He's changed over the years and he's become a more pragmatic man. But speaking of the fullbacks, they are both set to join the attack and overlap as well as step up. Like I mentioned in one of my previous videos, I find that when you have step up on, it does allow them to be a bit more attacking and hang up the field a lot more, or get up the field a lot more. So it does work out quite well. As you can see for Zawalski, he has got the same set of instructions as well. Now, moving slightly higher up the field, we have got Dybala. Him and Pellegrini have similar instructions, but not exactly the same, because Dybala will look to more or less play on the shoulder of Abraham, whereas Pellegrini will be more or less a box-to-box cam. But Dybala is set to basic defensive support, get into the box for the crosses, of course, drift wide. You do need them to provide some width for the likes of Abraham, otherwise you'll just have a cluster of players more or less attacking the same area. So you do want them to provide you with going forward, of course, with the likes of your wing backs. So that is why we have that set to drift wide, and of course normal interceptions will be on. As for the likes of Pellegrini, he is set to come back on defense, so he'll look to help the likes of Cristante and Matic, but he'll also look to link the play between the deep-lying midfield players and of course the attacking players in Dybala and Abraham. He's also set to get into the box. This is where the box-to-box midfielder comes in, and then of course he's set to drift wide and normal interceptions are on. As for Abraham, of course, he's the focal point going forward. He's very tall, very strong. He's set to stay central. He does have a very nice bag of tricks that he can perform whilst playing for Jose. He is a very physical player, but he is also very talented when it comes to the pace and the natural raw talent that he has. So I didn't want to just say get him behind, which he does have instructions going forward in other set of tactics, but I also didn't want him to just be the focal target man. I want him to use all of his ability, not just some of it. So that is why we have him set to a mixed attack, and then of course he is the focal point, like I said, so he will be set to stay forward. So now with this set of instructions, we have 3 more to do, so stay tuned, hit the like button of course. But with this, as you can see, it's a similar shape but way more defensive, and you will see as we progress that it gets a bit higher and higher and higher. So nothing's really changed apart from the fact that your wing backs are now more or less fullbacks formation, of course. Fullbacks, they're not wing backs, they're more or less fullbacks, so they will look to be a bit more inverted, a bit more defensively sound as well. And of course, your 2 attacking midfielders are slightly lower, so they are still attacking midfielders, but their roles do change ever so slightly. As you can see here, the defensive style is set to drop back, so you want them to always be in their formation, always be structurally sound. Of course, the width is set to 20, so it's very narrow, very compact, making sure that the defense or the offense cannot take advantage of your defense. As for the depth, you don't want any players advancing up high up the field, so it is also set to 20. This is very much a park the bus mentality that Jose does instill in his team. Of course, when you are looking to just protect a 1-0 lead or a 2-1 lead, you will more or less revert to these tactics. Of course, it is set to long ball, so you will look for the likes of Tammy Abraham, who will be the only guy up front from time to time. So that does make a bit more sense. And then of course forward runs for the likes of Tammy Abraham and maybe a Paulo Dybala to try and get forward with him, of course. And then of course the width is also set to 40, so you don't, even when you have the ball, you don't want to be super expansive with it. You just want to clear it more or less. And then of course players in the box is set to 1, the lowest we've ever had on the channel, but that is more or less for the likes of your fullback to maybe make an advancing run, or Paulo Dybala to make an advancing run and maybe look for a counter attack with Tammy Abraham. But of course most of your players will more or less look to stay back, make sure that they're in their structure, in their formation, going forward, going backwards, of course. As for corners and free kicks, you don't want to overcommit players. And again, the lowest it's ever been on the channel with it both set to 1. Now, as for the instructions, of course, the goalkeeper, the defenders, of course, they more or less stay the same. Basically, your fullbacks will look to just stay back while attacking. They're not going to really look to progress forward, just as well as your 2 DMs who have the same set of instructions as well. Both set to stay back, both set to tight mark. It's going to be in your own half more times than not. It is a very scary way of playing because you do invite pressure on, but at the same time, it does more or less work because you do lock up you create a wall in front of your goalkeeper essentially with a 5-man defense, 2 DMs in front, and then 3 attacking players out. Both Pellegrini and Dybala are set to come back on defense, get into the box, of course, from time to time. So they will sometimes look to make an advancing run if you have sprung an efficient and a successful counter attack, of course. And then both are set to sticks position and normal interceptions. Like I say, sticks position is essential, especially with this. You want to try and keep your shape in your formation. And then, of course, as you can see, it has Dybala's set of instructions, of course. And then, as for Tammy Abraham, he's set to balance width, so he will look to maybe run the channels a bit more. So if there is a ball that's hoofed up the field, he will look to more or less drift into that position and also take the ball to the corner flag. Of course, there is that as well, but he is also set to get in behind, so he will be looking to more or less test the defense on the counter attack with his runs in behind. And then of course normal interceptions are on and stay forward, so he will be that almost doing a graveyard shift going forward. Now as for the next set of instructions, also fairly defensive but slightly less. So if you are early on in the game, you just want to try and see out the opposition's relentless attacking, you can more or less revert to this. It is a bit more narrow, but it does also allow you to bring more successful counter-attacks, I should say. But basically, nothing has really changed apart from I have dropped the wing-backs slightly more from the original formation. So that they normally play a little bit higher, but now I've dropped them slightly more. And then, of course, I have made the attacking midfielders slightly more narrow as well. Of course, I am referring back to the original formation every time. I'm not referring back to the previous one, so just keep that in mind. But as for the tactics, it is set to drop back. So again, you are going to want to be a bit more structurally sound, a bit more defensively accurate with keeping your shape and everything like that. With the set to 20, depth is set to 20 as per always, like I mentioned with the previous set of instructions. Slow build-up will be on, and then forward run. So you're not looking exactly to always counter-attack. You're looking just to try and get the ball back, try and take the opposition out of the game with a slow approach to the game. So if this is real life and you can cause fouls and just slow the game down, knock up the game a bit more, this is more or less what I envision with Jose Mourinho going forward, and more or less what I have seen in the gameplay that I have seen of him. As for the width, it's set to 65, so slightly more narrow than the original. But again, you will be looking to get the ball out to your wing-backs who will look to advance it up the field. As for players in the box, slightly less as well. We've just got 2 players, and that being Paulo Dybala as well as the likes of Tammy Abraham, with Paulo Dybala playing slightly off the shoulder. And then as for corners and free kicks, it is set to 3. So again, as for the instructions going forward, the goalkeeper is set to the same, as well as your 3 centre-backs. They are more or less set to the same. Of course, in this one, Mancini is set to his normal set of instructions where he needs to be aggressive, he needs to step up and step out, attacking the opposition's offense, of course. As for the fullbacks, they are set to balance attack, so they won't be always looking to bomb on forward, but they can do it at the same time. And then they will be looking to overlap, providing the width for the team going forward, as you can see there. We've got Spinazzola set to the same set of instructions, but of course they won't be set to step up. I forgot to mention that. So that they won't look to be aggressive, impose themselves physically on the opposition's forwards. They will look to more or less be defensively sound, structurally okay going forward, but they will look to sometimes advance the ball up, depending on how much of the ball you have, how much possession you have, of course. As for Cristante and Matic, they are set to their normal set of instructions. Cover centre, tight marking, stay back while attacking, so still being the shield in front of that back line, as you can see there. As for Pellegrini and Dybala, they have more or less the same set of instructions, but this time Dybala is set to having a balanced crossing run, so he won't always look to play off the shoulder more times than not of Abraham. It will alternate between the two of either Pellegrini or Dybala. So one will advance forward, the other one will more or less look to stay back. But of course, both of them are set to drift wide, and normal interceptions are on, as you can see right there. Now we've got Tammy Abraham. He's set to stay central, so he's not going to be running any channels or anything like that. Of course, mixed attack, so he will look to get in behind, or he will look to try and link up play with either Pellegrini or Dybala going forward. And then of course he is set to come back on defense, so he will have a bit more of a defensive structure to him, so he will look to drop in, link up play as well, like I mentioned earlier, and just, you know, provide another layer of shielding for the midfield, who are providing a layer of shielding for the back line. So yes, then finally the last formation. Again, I've been talking quite a bit, so if you can hit that like button, it would mean the absolute world to me. Anyway, we are playing with a dual striker tandem up front, one cam, as you can see here. Here is the set of instructions. Just ignore that it says a 3-4-2-1. I went and manually changed the structure and the team, of course. But again, 3 centre backs, 2 DMs, 2 wing backs, 1 cam this time, and then of course 2 strikers up front. So in this, the way I envisioned it was, of course, sometimes Jose does bring on the likes of Belotti for Dybala, which is why Dybala has that right-hand side striker role. So more or less, if you do go with this formation and you want to be very attacking going forward, bring on Belotti. He will offer you more of a physical approach. He can be a target man, of course, and then of course take off Dybala. And I forgot to mention that, but for the previous set of instructions, more or less look to try and take off Dybala for a more defensively solid player, because of course Dybala is more of a flair player and won't offer you a lot of defense going forward. So yes, before we advance on. So as for the tactics, of course it's going to be a bit more attacking with this set of tactics. Instead to press after loss of possession, of course you will look to press, but this time you look to press a little bit higher up, making your forwards do a bit more work, of course. And more times than not, Jose likes to implement the system when they are chasing a goal or are chasing a game, of course. So you will look to press slightly higher. Of course, you can do that with the D-pad, and implement presses after goalkeeper restarts or throw-ins or so on. But as for the width, as per always, it is set to 20. So even though you are trying to commit as many men forward, you're still looking to remain defensively compact, defensively solid. So there's no quick through balls through the middle of the park, of course. But as for the depth, it's slightly higher, or actually it's a lot higher. It's more of a high press. It will help with your 3 defenders being a lot higher, maintaining the ball, of course. And you want it to be a nice high level line, of course, that if the defense do try and counter-attack on you, they will be caught up offside. I can't even get the words out of my mouth. But as for the build-up play, it is set to slow build-up, of course, as per always, and then forward runs. You want your forwards like Belotti, like Tammy Abraham, like Pellegrini getting into the box to try and attack the crosses that will be flying in, because the width is set to 85, so your wing backs, they will be crossing the ball a lot more because you have more targets to try and hit in the box. As for players in the box, of course, it is set to 8, which is quite high, but you want to try and commit as many players forward. Cristante this time will be allowed to get into the box, or just into the box, I should say, being able to function in that space that gets left behind, with the forwards drawing a lot of the defenders onto them. As for corners and free kicks, it is set to 4 each, as per always. So as for the goalkeeper, it is set to the same, as well as Smalling and Ibanez, and then Mancini is set to a slightly different role. You don't want him to overcommit, because now you are overcommitting players slightly higher than him, so you don't want him to be able to step up, step out of defense from time to time. You want him just to, remain defensively solid with the likes of Smalling and Ibanez. But Matic and Cristante, they have slightly differing roles. Matic is set to being a tight marker, stand back while attacking normal interceptions and cover the centre, as per always. But Cristante, tight marking and a balanced attack, so he will look to get forward a bit more. Like I say, he will look to maybe get into the box from time to time. And he is also set to cover centre, so he will more or less look to back up Pellegrini slightly higher up the field. As for your wing backs in this situation, they are going to look to join the attack and overlap, and of course stick to position. So like I say, you are committing players forward, but you don't want the likes of Mancini and your wing backs to try and be too aggressive with the opposition, because that's when players get pulled out of position, and that is more or less when mistakes happen and goals are scored against you, and then you're ripping out your hair. Hence why I'm wearing a cap. No, I'm joking. I make a joke. I have hair. I'm not going to do that because I have a bad hair day. Hence the cap. But you want your guys to be defensively solid, and that's why you have gone. Oh, that's why I've gone with the stick to position. So you don't want them to step up, step out. As for Pellegrini, of course, he is set to come back on defense, so he will try and link up the play between the midfield, Cristante Matic, and of course your wing backs. He is set to get into the box. Of course, you want a more attacking presence, but he is also set to drift wide. So he does have a more similar role, but a more central role. So he will look to drift wide, link up play with Spinazzola, link up play with Wolski, and of course he is set to normal interceptions. Now, this is where things slightly change going forward with the forwards. Of course, just think that it's not Dybala, it's Belotti, of course. So Tammy Abraham, he is set to drift wide, so he will be running the channels for those balls that get hoofed up over the defense. He is set to get in behind, of course, he's got pace, of course. No interceptions are on, and then he's going to be your focal point going forward. He will look to stay forward. And then, of course, you would have Dybala / Belotti. He is set to stay central, be a target man. So it's a nice tandem of potentially balls being fired into Belotti at any height and him flicking it on for Tammy Abraham. He is set to normal interceptions and, of course, basic defensive support. So he will look to maybe come back a bit more, or depending on how the game is going and how much ball possession you do have, he will look to maybe be a bit more advanced, allowing for Pellegrini to pick up the ball and have the ball running at his feet going forward. So, I have done it. I have completed the Jose Mourinho set of tactics going forward. I hope you have enjoyed it. It has been a mission and a half getting this to all work together as a whole. So if you can, hit the like button. If you can, subscribe. That would be damn near great. I would absolutely appreciate it. But of course, until the next time, my dudes, I hope you have a damn great day, and I am out.